Okay, here we have our presentation for CS4620. This is our final project for the databases course. I'm Jake Schwartz, and with me are...
I'm Alex Neargarder.
And I am Noah Glazier.
And we're here to demo our program called Encounter. It is a text-based adventure game that we worked on a previous course, and we now have SQLite 3 databases working with it. So I will go ahead and give a quick demo. You can start or exit the game when you go ahead and start. There's a little tutorial here. I've seen it 100 times, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip it. So the game is set up as events where like little things happen as you play the game, and in between each event you have this thing called the intermission, where you can catch your breath. You can open and access your inventory, so you can discard items, use items, things like that. You can open the logbook, which if I want to search for an item, say I want to search for a potion, it'll give me all the information about all the different potions. So say I want to learn about the minor mana potion, it'll give me all the information about that, and that connects straight to the database to pull that information. If I want to search for an enemy, say the archer, it'll tell me all the information about the archer, how much damage it does, HP, what number it is, and the information based on what kind of items it drops. So that's called the logbook. You can experiment that with yourself if you're so inclined. To go back into the main thing, the items in the inventory are pulled from the database as well, and every single event, so we'll get a random event, this is a shop, we can go ahead and enter the shop. All of this information is pulled from the database, so the information on the event, so whatever the event is doing, so this is the shop, and the items that can be purchased from the shop are all randomly selected from the database. So if I say I want to purchase a key, it'll go ahead and purchase the key and add it to my inventory. If I exit the shop, there it is in the inventory. If I want to show a description, it'll tell me about the key. And you just play the game, and there are so many events. So here I can gather materials for fire or look for shelter. I'm going to go ahead and gather materials. I found the materials, and I'm going to sleep. Oh, look, I gained 5 HP. So there's all these different events you can happen, and they're all random. So every time you play the game, it'll be different. And the items are randomized as well. And here we got a treasure chest, and I can use my key to open it, and it'll give me a random item. After so many events, you'll get to a boss fight. So let me see if I can get to that. Here it is. So this is the first mini boss. There is a final boss. If you beat the final boss, you beat the game. And this is the combat screen, so you can go ahead and attack. You can use your magic, so I want to cast Fireball, and so on. And you can just play the game, and it's different every time. So you have a different experience every time you play it. So going from there, I will let Alex explain what actual work he did on the database itself.
So the main thing that I was working on was loading all the events from the database and sort of executing them. So the first thing we have here is where we're like actually loading in the information for a given event. So we have the event ID, and then the select star gets all of the attributes for that event. And then we basically just parse that to get all the sort of the story text, all of the options that you'll have in that event, and then also all the actions that will be taken before or after that event, and the actions that'll be taken depending on what options you choose in the event, like if you're going to gain or lose HP or get specific items or what event is going to happen next. That's all sort of taken care of as well, and that's stored in the database and loaded into the actions. And then, yeah, if we go there, we have, this is where we're actually loading all the event IDs. So basically, we'll load in when we start up the game, we'll load in all the possible different event IDs that you can get. And we have specific events that are marked as like starting events. So they're like the start of a series of events. So we get all of those events that are starting events. And those will basically be the events that we will randomly select every time we complete an event series. And also we have all the events that can happen multiple times loaded in separately. So that's basically all that does.
And to show the actual database that is pulled from the events, I went ahead and opened it up in DB Browser for SQLite. So here is...
Yep.
I'll let Alex explain it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we got like a bunch of different attributes. We have the event ID. That's our primary key. It's the unique identifier. The event name is just kind of as a quick description, so we can identify them. And those are only on the starting events, which we can see the is start attribute marks whether an event is the start of a series of events. The allow multiple indicates whether it can show up multiple times. I think that's only marked for very few. And then pre-actions. The pre-action stuff is basically, to quickly summarize it, it's sort of like a mini programming, or I guess you'd call it a scripting language that we have that just sort of tells the game what is supposed to happen before that event, and then we use the same syntax later on some of the other attributes as well. And then we have the story text attribute, which is just kind of like the telling you what's happening, and then the choices, which are basically the buttons or the options that you have. And then the result text is using that same sort of scripting text like I mentioned before, that just sort of says what happens if you choose a specific option. The result text will determine what happens. And yeah, that's basically all of it.
So we will go ahead and pass it on to Noah, and he can explain what he did. Give me 1 second.
So the main thing that I worked on for the project was the logbook. It essentially is just searching either the items database or the enemies database, and it'll search for IDs or the name of the item or enemy. And if you're searching for the name, then it doesn't have to be exact. As you saw in the demo, like searching for potion will match against all of everything that has potion in the name in the database. So it essentially is just loading them into an array. You're loading your search results into an array, and that gets passed on to another function that essentially just shows them the same way the items are shown in your inventory.
From there, he also worked on the enemies database, if I can find it. There it is. Where it works in a very similar way, where if you type in partial names, it'll give you the actual full name of the enemy, and it'll search it. And from there, I designed a drops table, which is what this code involves, where it will tell you, it'll join the enemies, items, and drops table to tell you what drops the enemy can drop. So when you type in an enemy name, it'll tell you, here's the archer can drop a minor healing potion or something as an example. That isn't right, but it's an example. And this is what the code does to generate what it drops, and it combines the tables together to figure that out. Noah worked on the initial search box and actually accessing the table. I added the thing that added the drops to differentiate what exactly we worked on. From there, I also worked on combat, so very similar to how it works in the logbook. The combat will join those tables I spoke of before to determine what item the enemy and what available items the enemy can drop, and from there pick a random one of those and give it to you whenever you defeat the enemy in a random combat. I also added database support for the inventory, so it's connected to the database here, and if I search it, can't remember the name. Sorry about that. If we add an item, it will search the item from the database, and there is a line that does this. So get item from database, it'll search the item based on the ID, return all the information based on that item, and then either from there add it to your inventory or display it on screen or whatever it needs to do. We also had Alex, we're jumping around a little bit, but Alex, go ahead and if you want to explain the enemies real fast.
Well, I don't think I worked on this. Wasn't this someone else?
Oh, I thought you did. Oh, never mind then. So someone worked on the enemies, pulling the enemies from the database, and it'll just...
All right, no, actually, did I do that? Oh, no, I did. You're right. I think I did. I think you changed it a bit, but yeah. I did. Yeah, I did do that real quick, but it's a little bit different, I think. Oh no, maybe it is the same. Yeah, well, I had the code for the select count thing is just used so that I get the count so that I can select a random uh, enemy, basically, and then the select enemy ID. Yeah, that's for choosing the random enemy, basically. Yeah.
Basically, it
I think
pulls the
there's
enemy from the database and shows it up in combat.
yeah, and then there's the other query which actually gets all the enemy attributes and stuff, which is right there. Yeah.
But it creates the enemy object in the program that the program can use to make an enemy, basically.
Yeah, it just sets their HP, damage, and name, which it gets from the database.
Before we go, I want to go ahead and show the database structure. We have 4 different tables. We have drops, enemies, events, and items. All those have the information there. If you want to look at the database yourself, you can. It will be included. I think that's all we really have for our demonstration. So thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, go ahead and ask one of us. We can probably answer it. So thank you.